So today we're going to start and pick up where we left off yesterday on macromolecules. As we mentioned yesterday, macromolecules really play an important role in life, and we're going to keep looking at their structure and function at a deeper level. And this PowerPoint, as you note, is different than yesterday's PowerPoint. Yesterday's PowerPoint slides were just meant as an introductory PowerPoint. This is getting into more depth of the function and structure. So macromolecules, they're important to living things. Yesterday we discussed and talked about four main categories. The first one we were talking about were carbohydrates. We noted that they were sugars, that you could have many different types. We talked about breads. We talked about pastas, starches, all of those, how they turn to sugars. And we'll look closer at those as we go through today. Proteins is our next category. Proteins are important in muscle building and other functions. The third one was lipids. That has to deal with fats, oils, waxes, and even steroids, believe it or not, are considered to be lipids or classified as lipids. And then the last one was nucleic acids, which deals with deoxyribonucleic acid, commonly known as DNA, and ribonucleic acid, RNA. The very first one we're going to look at is carbohydrates. Carbohydrates have a very distinguishing feature in that they only consist of carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. And they're always in a mathematical ratio of a 1-to-1 ratio, as you note up here. You've got one carbon, two hydrogens, and one oxygen, and they're always in that ratio. Now, do they always have to be a 1-to-1? Most certainly not. If you look down here at the bottom, you got glucose is 6, hydrogen is 12, oxygen is 6, but we know if you reduce that down, you still get a 1-to-1 ratio. So molecules made up of only one sugar molecule are commonly referred to as monosaccharides. So it's just one sugar, basically, and what you've got down here is a monosaccharide of glucose. And so glucose is very important. All sugars are important to those with diabetes, but glucose is one of our body's first packages of energy that we're going to go to throughout our meal. Once we start breaking things down, the sugars get used first. They're just easier to break apart and utilize. So they will get used first. So we do have some important monosaccharides we need to talk about. You got glucose, of course, which we've talked about in blood sugar, diabetes. You've got ribose, which is a very important sugar in DNA and RNA. And then you've got the glyceraldehyde. Glyceraldehyde. Yes, glyceraldehyde. There you go. So these all have, of course, formulas, and there they are: C6H12O6, C5H10O5, C3H6O3. And again, if you were to reduce these down, you should get a 1-to-1 ratio. Yes. Now, if I go too fast, feel free to pause at any moment, but you are required and expected to have all these notes down as we go through today. Monosaccharides can be joined together, and what we're going to use to join those together is the dehydration synthesis, we talked about yesterday. We made note that this dehydration synthesis actually is where we remove water out of the compound, and I told you about kind of like, think of wringing a rag out. You're getting rid of all of the water there. And once we've removed the water from the monosaccharides, we can then join them together into a chain, and that chain would be called polysaccharides. And it's made up of many sugar molecules placed together in a line. And so you see here, you've got 5 sugars placed together, and we would call that a polysaccharide, not a monosaccharide. Some examples of important polysaccharides, which you may or may not have known about. Starches, commonly find starches in potatoes, potato chips. You might find them in stuff like pastas, breads. Cellulose. Cellulose is another important polysaccharide. We get these mostly from plants. If you want to think of things like apples when you bite into those, or celery, those type of things. Those are plant sugars. And then the last type, of course, is glycogen. And glycogen plays another important role. And we'll talk about that more as we go. But these are three very important polysaccharides to your body. And keep in mind, we're going to refer to our body as much as possible and the roles that these play in our body, because your project next week will incorporate being a medical doctor and seeing how things malfunction and how they can be corrected. So what do carbohydrates do? Why do we need carbohydrates? Well, they are a first line of energy. They're going to supply energy to your body. And so cells burn glucose for their energy needs. That's just the simplest structure that they can grab a hold of, break down easily, and utilize quickly. And we'll go through and learn more about that, but that's what you need to know right now, is that they are our body's first line of energy. Carbohydrates supply energy in the form here of animal cells. Get this, and animal cells can store glucose as glycogen. So there's the reference. So when you have too much sugar, it'll be stored back in the form of glycogen. Carbohydrates supply energy. So you got starch here. Starch is available in plant cells. We talked about the potato. And then the plant cells here will store glucose as starch. And so when we consume a potato, we're actually consuming starch, which will get broken down back into glucose. They can also be structural. Plants use glucose to form things like stems and stalks. Those are important. But they're going to use glucose to make cellulose, and cellulose makes plants sturdy. So when you're looking at celery or any type of plant that has sturdiness to it, you know right away that there is cellulose in that plant. And that could be anything from a tomato plant to a celery plant to a cabbage, lettuce, whatever it is. So there is lots of cellulose in those. So again, our body will break those down into sugars. Carbohydrates can also help with cell identification. If you notice, they have a glycoprotein there. The glycoprotein is sort of a weird concept between two items here. It's got carbohydrate plus part of a protein. So they have proteins with sugars attached on the surface of the cells, and this helps them recognize, is it part of myself or is it a foreign invader? And so that is definitely important in immunology as well as other factors. Glycoproteins are important for several things. Glycoprotein marks blood types. So if we go to the blood drive and you're going to donate blood, you could have type A, type B, type O, or type AB, and you're really only supposed to get your type of blood. Your body would reject other types, except for O, which is a universal donor. We'll talk more about that later. But organs will reject blood types that aren't marked with the proper glycoprotein. And so again, this goes back to a function of carbohydrates and sugars. The other thing I talked about, immunology, is the importance in their role in recognizing germs. If you have a foreign invader coming into your body, if it's not marked with the appropriate glycoprotein, then your body's going to attack it. And rightfully so. It could be a virus, it could be a bacteria, but your body is going to surround it and attack it and try to break it down and get it out of your system to maintain health within your body. So we've covered carbohydrates. We may get into just a little bit of proteins today. Let's go ahead and we'll start here. We may not finish with this one, but we'll at least get into this. Proteins are a little bit different. They're going to contain carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen, and they are built from amino acid subunits. So you're having carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and we're adding a nitrogen, and you have an amino acid subunit, which is the little NH unit over here, and you've also got the CO and the COH subunit. And this R subunit will be important later, and we'll teach you how to read this and what this means as we go along as well. So some important amino acids here in proteins, and proteins are just the building blocks of muscle. But some important amino acids here. You've got the general structure here is you've got an amino group over here, the NH group. It's called an amino group. You have a carboxyl group over here in the blue, and then you have something called an R group, and we'll talk more about that in a moment. That R group can actually change depending on the amino acid that we're looking at. You notice one of the amino acids over here is alanine, and it has C with 3 H's. However, if we look at another one called serine, it has 2 H's and it has a hydroxide group, an OH group attached. So amino acids, again, are important for building blocks for your muscles. When you go through and you lift weights, you're actually tearing muscle down. And so as you tear muscle down, it can be built back stronger and can layer more and more muscle into that. The R group is different for each amino acids, and we'll talk about these amino acids a little bit as we go. But I think we're going to stop at this slide today. Let's go ahead and finish this out. There are 20 different amino acids used by cells to make proteins. But we're going to go ahead and stop here. Make sure you get this slide down so you know we're picking up tomorrow. But go through and write these down. Get these groups down as well. So kind of draw these out. There's glycine, alanine, glutamic acid, and histidine. And so get all of those down and get all the information. I'm going to come by and check, make sure you've got all of your notes down for today. And once you've got your notes down, I can come around and take a look at those, give you a grade for those, and then there'll be a lesson waiting for you, or assignment awaiting for you on edmodo.com as soon as you're finished with this slideshow today. Thank you for your time. Let me have any feedback that you may have over this, so we'll continue to improve this. Again, this is our first real go at this, so it's new to me just as it's new to you. Thank you for your time, and let me see your notes and log on to Edmodo.